Greetings and welcome to a brand new Gaming Codex, the show where I try to explain to you all the various terms used to describe video games and the video games industry. There's going to be many of these episodes. And on today's one we have the Moba, the Multiplayer Online Battle Arena. And what exactly is that? Well, according to what appears to be the general definition, because I found it on Wikipedia and on that gaming wiki, Multiplayer Online Battle Arena, or MOBA, also known as Action Real-Time Strategy (ARTS), is a genre of strategy video games that originated as a subgenre of real-time strategy in which a player controls a single character in one of two teams. The objective is to destroy the opposing team's main structure with the assistance of periodically spawned computer-controlled units that march forward along set paths. Player characters typically have various abilities and advantages that improve over the course of a game and that contribute to a team's overall strategy. MOBA games are a fusion of action game, role-playing game, and real-time strategy games in which players usually do not construct either buildings or units. Half of this definition is absolute horse manure, and anybody that endorses it or stops me from editing it, and have been doing it for years, are complete and utter poo-poo heads. Let's see you ban that, YouTube. I'm mostly referring to the part where this is classified in any way as a real-time strategy. It's not. It absolutely isn't. It's like saying that the part of Diablo 2 where you rescue some barbarians and go around killing stuff with them alongside you is StarCraft. It's not. It's Diablo. It's an action RPG. It's a hack and slash, most of it. Well, kind of an action RPG. I'm gonna do an action RPG thing later on. This is not an RTS. Calling it an action RTS really messes things up because there are action RTSs. There's parts of Giants and Kabuto that are action RTS, as in it's an action game where you shoot stuff and you have an RTS component where you build stuff and you get resources and you command units. Brutal Legend also has that. There was that series of games, well, two of them, Savage or something, where you did kind of the same thing. It was actually in multiplayer. Those can be classified as action real-time strategy games. Heck, there was one a while ago, an RTS, where you could actually take control of some characters, like Cleopatra, I believe was one of them, and you could shoot things with a bow like you were in an action game, and you could also switch out to a third-person view and control the character like a unit in a RTS. That was an action real-time strategy game. A MOBA is not. There is nothing in a MOBA that can be qualified as being strategic. There is no strategy element in the sense of a real-time strategy game of an RTS. Nothing. Anybody that keeps insisting on calling this an action RTS is a poo-poo head. Is someone that just can't really get over the fact that Riot coined the term MOBA to distinguish themselves from DOTA and to make a genre out of this where they can exist without constantly referring back to DOTA. And the poo-poo heads were insulted by this, so when they couldn't coin the phrase DOTA-like, which is honestly a good way to refer to this genre, they call it action RTS, going by the reasoning that, well, since this was made out of an RTS, then it too is an RTS. Much like RTS is made out of Half-Life 2 are first-person shooters. You know, that doesn't make sense, right? That makes no sense. The part about this being a game where you control one character in one of two teams, where you destroy the enemy base and there's AI units that you don't control and you evolve over time, you get more abilities, more powers, sometimes more equipment. Yeah, that's actually what a MOBA is. Now, what is the popular definition of MOBA? Well, that would be DOTA. That's it. That's absolutely it. The popular definition is spot on the money. The general one is made by 12-year-olds who can't really fathom that, again, we can't let Ryan dictate the future. We can't let some corporate entity tell us what our game is, so we're gonna say what it is and be wrong about it. I have absolutely no empathy for the MOBA community, if you're wondering. They are, well, especially League of Legends players, they are the scum of the earth and must be cleansed with fire sometimes. But back to the general idea. The MOBA genre started off as a bunch of mods in StarCraft. Well, one mod, Aeon of Strife, which later was sort of adapted into a map, a custom map for Warcraft 3 called Defense of the Ancients by a modder called Kyle Summer, also known as Ewell. And from there, Dota went through the hands of Stephen Feek, also known as Gwinso, and through the hands of Icefrog, Abdul Ismail, and became what we know it to be today, Dota. It's the game where you've got two teams, Radiant and whatever their name is. They kill stuff, they last hit things, they eat trees from time to time to regain health. So that's a Dota thing, not a MOBA thing. You've got lanes, you've got wards, you've got jungles, you've got this picture right here. This is a MOBA. This accurately describes most MOBAs. There are some variations, I mean, it's not always the same map. It does have other features, but basically that's a MOBA. Now, the term itself, multiplayer online battle arena, has been criticized as being a bit too nebulous because pretty much anything can be described by that name. I mean, Quake 3 can be described as a multiplayer online battle arena. And yeah, that's true, it's kind of a nebulous term. It doesn't describe exact mechanics like a first-person shooter would or a real-time strategy game would, though that doesn't actually seem to matter to some people. But the reason that MOBA works, even though it's so nebulous, is the same reason that 4X works, even though again it is kind of nebulous. I mean, when you think 4X, you kind of think about a turn-based game or a kind of a slow, with time compression options, real-time game where you build a giant empire and crush everything in your wake. You have mechanics in mind when you think of that, and you have those mechanics in mind because of Civilization, because the first games to use that term, or to be described by that term, solidified it to the point where it means nothing other than those kinds of games. And that's the same thing with MOBAs. You can't call Quake 3 a MOBA. Dota and League are MOBAs. Quake 3 is an FPS. It's something completely different. Until the people that came up with Action RTS probably get their hands on it. Then it's all bets off. Regardless of what form a MOBA takes, it's gonna be a MOBA. Smite is a third-person game that has elements of more fine aiming, or not necessarily fine aiming, but it sort of feels a bit more action-y than the other MOBAs, but still a MOBA. That thing that Epic made, still a MOBA. Battleborn sort of looked like a MOBA at first until it turned out to be a commercial failure. Monday Night Combat, that was also a MOBA, and again it was a lot more action-oriented, it was a lot more dependent on the player actually being able to manually target things. And I'm not sure if there was that much of a progression in the level, but still it kind of ticked off a lot of the this is a MOBA ideas. I mean, you had them creeps, you went around and blew up stuff. No, I actually think you did build stuff in that one. It's been a long time and I think both games are dead, so it really doesn't matter. Speaking of which, what is the marketing definition of a MOBA? Well, that would be what everything tried to be until we started ripping off Team Fortress 2, because there was a time when everything tried to be a MOBA. Absolutely everybody was making one. Paradox made one. Paradox, the company that won't jump on a trend unless that trend is somehow related to making puns about space being great again, made a MOBA. It was shut down, but that was a MOBA. They kinda didn't really call it a MOBA, but it was a MOBA. Wizard Wars, by the way, that was the game. Well, they kinda jumped on the card game thing too, but it was actually before everybody started doing it. They're kinda ahead of the curve on that one. But everybody wanted to make MOBAs because, well, Dota was popular. But most importantly, League of Legends became the biggest game in history for a while. It was gigantic. It was bringing in profit the likes of which you had not seen since World of Warcraft. Everybody wanted a piece of that pie. But unfortunately, the pie was actually in the stomach of Riot, so getting at it was a bit difficult. So that's why we had Heroes of New World, which was Dota, but with slightly better graphics and different names for the exact same heroes. That's why we had that Electronic Arts thing that died. That's why we had that Warner Bros. Superhero thing that died. That's why we had that Lord of the Rings thing that was released for consoles first and then died. That's why we had Smite, which isn't dead. It's actually doing okay because it has its own niche, being third person. That's why we have Heroes of the Storm and Dota 2, and well, Awesome Knots, again a MOBA. It's doing its own thing, which is nice. It's free now, by the way. And that's why we have a bajillion other MOBAs, to the point where we start to wonder, could you rip off something else? And they started ripping off Team Fortress 2. Are you happy now? Well, I kinda am because I like Overwatch. So closes this edition of the Gaming Codex. I'll be back next time with an even more divisive term and probably more swear words. Goodbye.